Good afternoon, you fantastic and glorious human beings of this floating rock that we call Earth. Welcome to a very special and very shortly published episode of Off the Wire. I'm your host, Noella Lynn, aka the Cajun Libertarian, and I'm going to be bringing on Idaho Joe, a friend of mine who we've talked for many years now. He's always been awesome. We disagree on this particular LP presidential campaign, and we can get into some other stuff too, because I think we have a lot of things going on that need to be addressed, not just political campaigns. But without further ado, let's bring on the man of the hour, Idaho Joe. Joe, how are you, brother?
I'm doing good, Noel. Doing good.
Awesome. First of all, I love this, man. Thank you so much for agreeing to this, especially on just such short notice. It's been like pulling teeth to get people to have conversations about this kind of stuff. So mad respect to you. Hats off. Thank you.
It's a hot button topic, and there's an awful lot of things going on around it, with regards to disinformation, regards to the way people are handling things, and the way people are applying certain biases to things that they've been told without researching the accuracy behind the statements. We continue to see an awful lot of disinformation along the lines of, what does the Libertarian candidate support? Is he supporting state-sponsored, or is he simply allowing what we always considered stay out of the culture war and allow the parents to decide for themselves what they allow their children to be involved in? Whether that's medical decisions, entertainment decisions, and so on. We want to give parents the freedom to be the stewards of their children that they're supposed to be. Give them that responsibility. We don't want the state handling it. Yet here we are, we have people demanding the state intercede where they feel that parents aren't being responsible with the stewardship of their children. And we continue.
So I just want to clarify for everybody, because there's going to be a lot of people that see the show and they're not going to know this tweet.
Right, so they're not.
The reason that we're here, I asked Joe to come on, was because I saw a video and I'm not going to play that on my channel. I'm not putting that trash on my channel. A lot of stuff I put on here that is disgusting. You can go find the tweet. I'll put it on Twitter all day. It ain't going on my channel. But it's an inappropriately dressed drag queen and a very young child dancing together and throwing money at each other. So that is what brought Joe on. And all I did was quote tweet. I'm going to use the verbiage everybody uses, right? Whatever it's called now. I can't remember because it's X, but quote tweeted that video. And I forget who the even OP was, but I quote tweeted that video and I just said, and I tagged him in it, does @ChaseOliver support this? So that's what brought Joe on. And that's why he's saying that there's a lot of disinformation around what is being proposed and what isn't. And Joe, actually going to agree with you to an extent on about what we want the state involved in. However, under zero circumstances will I ever co-sign staying out of the culture war. The culture is politics. Politics is culture, and it must be battled. And this is a subject that I've repeatedly and vehemently said over and over again. You don't need the state to intervene on this disgusting behavior. This can absolutely be bullied back out of existence. And that's what I'm going to do unabashedly. I will 1000% just condemn and deride and bully these people back into the closet.
Yeah, and that's one thing. That's the freedom of speech. That's actually doing the human action that's involved. Now, what we're running into problems right now is this interest in legislating the culture war. Because that's one of the things I'm seeing an awful lot of the social conservatives out of the Mises caucus advocate for. They're not interested in the bullying or exercising the freedom of speech or trying to convince people that this is behavior that's inappropriate. They want it legislated. They want the state involved in assigning criminal penalties for a lot of this. Now, the video
to drag queens?
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay,
we've seen that.
Well, it's come out in several different Republican forums, and we're seeing more and more interest in it in certain libertarian circles as well, depending on who it is you're listening to and who it is you're talking to. Now, where Chase is with this is he doesn't mind the drag shows as long as they're tastefully done. What you've tweeted is appropriately or inappropriate for the scenario in which it was presented. Most of us agree with that. Social conservatives alike, most libertarians understand that that is not an appropriate use, an appropriate time and place for the particular performance that was occurring. But this is one of those situations where we get into, I'm not seeing these type of posts coming out of the left. I don't see left families taking their kids to these events and then recording them and then posting them to social media. What I'm seeing is extremely awkward and difficult situations for parents who have been placed in these situations, because the scenario you're looking at, it's an all ages event. As far as I can tell, this is literally nothing more than a stripogram that showed up at a public event. And now you got a drag queen, inappropriately attired, designed to embarrass some individual at this event. And now you got a kid that's all into it. And how do you walk that back afterwards? You can't.
Well,
let
me point out a couple of things specific to the video. And so please go watch the video. It's on my X account, literally right there at the Cajun Liberate 1. And I think you're going to agree with me on this, Joe. You watch that video and you can see this child. This is not the first time this child has been there. This child is clearly comfortable in performing, who has been at habitual events like this inappropriately. Now, let me ask you this. Are you more concerned with the people using sunlight as the best disinfectant over the parents dragging their kids to this? Because you say that the left doesn't post this. Yeah, because they don't want anybody to see it. That's why the people that are posting about it are using sunlight as a disinfectant, saying, here, this is happening, and this is disgusting and wrong and child abuse.
Well, the problem with using the sunlight to disinfect it is because they're in a situation where they are effectively normalizing it. This is an awful lot of people's first exposure to something like this. Okay, yeah, it's there. It's disgusting. But the kids are seeing it on their parents' feeds, on their Twitter accounts. They're seeing it, on the YouTube feeds. They're becoming exposed to the things that their parents are sharing back and forth on these accounts. Now, unless you're actually involved with your child and explaining why you posted what you posted and why they're seeing what they're seeing and whether it's appropriate behavior or not, you're not doing the children in any demographic any favor. This goes back to the issue of parenting. I don't like seeing it. I know an awful lot of people love the idea of using this to expose it. But at the same time, these same people are also involved in making sure that there are very dark shadows in certain places, like what happens in the churches. We see child abuse, we see child trafficking happening all across the United States right now. We're seeing not just these types of exposures, but other things that are being kept quiet. The reason why this is of particular interest to me is because Idaho, the state I live in, mind you, okay, extremely conservative state, very red state, yet Idaho has one of the highest rates of familial child trafficking in the United States. We're closing in on 50% of the child trafficking in the state of Idaho is being done by families. And this isn't being seen by the light of day. This isn't being exposed because a lot of it's happening in churches. A lot of it's happening through landlords. A lot of it's happening through exposure to family, friends, and drugs. In this case, probably have a bad case of meth addiction that's contributing to this particular way of getting the bills paid.
Okay.
But we're busy focusing on a targeted issue when there's a much broader, much more dangerous issue in this culture war that we really need to address. And that is whether or not children can consent.
Correct.
Which runs us back into another situation where we're getting into this back and forth in the libertarian circles, because we have people that are right now absolutely denigrating this type of behavior, rightfully so, but at the same time, they're arguing that children can consent. So where are we standing on this issue as a party?
Children cannot consent. Nobody, no
No,
serious person
they
in the
can't.
Libertarian Party says that children can consent, except
Right.
for like your presidential candidate who says that it's okay that children can consent to life-altering HRT, hormone replacement therapy. And we've even had I've had Chloe Cole on here, who's a budding star who had her breasts removed at 15 years old. That was
Okay,
done with
now,
the consent of the parent and the consent of the child. Should we allow that?
that comes back to that issue of, is the parent being allowed to be the proper steward of the child with the parent's understanding of what the child's situation is? Okay, now an awful lot of people have put this out that Chase is for mandatory transing. He's for state-sponsored transing. He's for taxpayer-funded transing, and surgery on children, which he's clearly stated he's against. So you step back and you take a look, what is it he's actually supporting? Okay, what he's supporting is parental rights to be the best steward possible for their child, up to and including limited use of hormone therapy. Now, that's really, now, according to the latest medical studies, to the best of my knowledge, and the other thing is Chase is very much in the affirmative with regards to safeguards. That is, the child, the doctor, the therapist, and the parents, both parents, mind you, are involved in any decisions related to this. And ultimately, the expense comes out of the family, and it's not being paid for or supported in any way by the state, because the therapy ultimately is elective.
So let me
go ahead.
Let me address that point, because you're saying both parents, and that's just objectively wrong. There are multiple court cases in the United States right now. There's one in Canada where the man was put in jail for refusing to trans his child. You've got multiple dads that cannot see. The judges have mandated no contact with the child because they won't agree to trans their children. So when you say both parents, that is objectively untrue. I just need to. I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking the argument, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, ultimately, now this is ideal situation. Both parents are involved in this decision. Now, we've looked at several of these court cases that are going around right now, and these are parents that are involved in divorce cases at this point. Okay, you're looking at who's getting custody of the child, why they're getting custody. You have therapists coming in and arguing for the child's on both sides. In several of these cases, you probably have guardian ad litems signed in order to evaluate, independent of the parents, what it is the child wants and what they believe to be in the child's best interest. So it's not like this is occurring in a vacuum. It's not like Munchausen is being allowed to decide whether or not these elective treatments are being applied to children who aren't at least relatively well informed of what it is that they are asking for or being asked of. Okay, you want a therapist involved. Your child's in counseling. You want to understand what's going on. You've probably even picked a therapist that you want to see gender affirming care that brings them back to their assigned gender at birth. I mean, a lot of people do that.
It's not sex is not assigned at birth. It's observed.
Well, I wish I could agree with you on that, but there are times we know that there are genetic abnormalities.
They make up less than a fraction of 1% of what we're talking about here, Joe.
Yeah, and trans represents a fraction of 1% of what we're talking about here.
No, we're talking about the whole trans to children issue, and you're trying to conflate that with the tiny fraction of less than 1%. You're talking about medical anomalies like a hermaphrodite who is born with multiple sex organs at the time of birth. That is way less than what we're talking about with transgenders.
Medical anomalies constitute 1 in 1,000, which is about where we're at right now with trans. Now, if you want to actually step back and take a look at what's going on with endocrine disruptors right now in the United States.
Oh, we can absolutely have that conversation. I love it because I think it's a major factor in that. But what we can't have is conflating a legitimate medical anomaly at birth versus a severe mental illness that is usually and almost always a social contagion in transgenderism for children. Those two things are not the same. It is not a medical deficiency per se to be a hermaphrodite at birth, to have multiple sex organs. You're still going to live most of them live healthy, fine lives. It is a severe mental illness to claim that you are not the sex in which you were born in.
Okay. And that's why you go through the process of the therapy to determine whether or not that is indeed an issue and whether or not it can be resolved by any of the treatments that are available outside, that require a gender reassignment request or procedure. Okay, now we know that things do not always work. Parents ultimately want to make sure that their child is happy, whether they're sane or not. Now, whether or not parents, with regards to the propaganda that's being fed them, and let's get around to that propaganda. Okay, we know that aside from the fact that the endocrine disruptors right now being fed to us by a food supply that's poisonous to our system and disrupting the lives of our children, okay, whether it's hormones that get flushed into our water and we turn around and drink, whether it's integrated into our food products, whether or not it's something else, we're dealing with endocrine disruptors that get into our brain, fuck up our gut flora, get into our gut flora, screw up our brain. One is thinking that we want things that aren't good for us because our balance is destructured, completely screwed up. How do we get away from the fact that our food is making us crazy and get around to addressing the issue of, for some people, it is already too late to correct that issue with making sure that their nutrition is right. They've already been poisoned by the system. They're already involved. They're already moving down that path. They already got the combination of trauma that reinforces the behavior pattern that was integrated into the way they think and the way they process information because they were poisoned by the system in which they live in. How do we take care of them?
Well, that's a good rabbit trail, and it's a very valid point that I talk about quite often. Number one, I think if we're going to be completely honest about your question right there, we actually need to really consider the things that RFK Jr. is saying in his MAGA Maha new alliance, with the focus on the Maha part, the Make America Healthy Again. Forget the fact that it's the orange man bad stuff. Let's focus on what RFK Jr. has been doing as a left-wing liberal for many decades, trying to make sure that he keeps our water supply clean, which is in America in 2024 is actually still a problem. Just the amount of fluoride alone and atrazine in the water supply is crazy. And all what you brought up is wildly out of control. If you compare, excuse me, and I think you know this, Joe, if you take the same, take a box of cereal that we sell here in America and take a box of cereal, that same box that we sell over in Europe, let's say Spain.
Right.
And you look at the ingredients, they're wildly different.
Okay, let's take it one step further. Let's look at the milk that we put in that cereal. Yeah, we don't want to go there. We do not want to go there because the hormones that are put in the cereal aren't actually canceled out by the pasteurization that's required and that's still required. We are still putting these endocrine disruptors, and not just, these are the hormones that are in our meat, our dairy, in order to create mass, which resales at, so much per pound. A lot of it's manufactured mass. It's BS. It's not value added. It's just weight added. So how are we looking at dealing with the fact that we have farmers enriching, our meat and our dairy with hormones and vaccines and other things, grain fed, on top of not even the natural diet of most of the meat we eat. They're being grain fed stuff that's not healthy for them. So here we are eating, third tier junk. And then you start taking a look at what our nutrients are being processed out of the foods, that we buy off the shelves because we want shelf life. A lot of it's being, and a lot of those are being replaced with petrochemicals in order to stabilize them on the shelf. So we're back to introducing, microplastics into everything we eat, which is also an endocrine disruptor. So here we got all these things that are messing with our gut, messing with our head. We got kids that don't recognize that what's being done to them because it is coming from our food. We literally work 2 and 3 jobs to feed our kids poison because that's all that's available.
Yep.
And it goes back to what RFK's been doing. I agree with him. Make America healthy again. Question is how do we do it? Because the FDA is corrupt, the USDA is corrupt, the DEA is corrupt. Every one of those organizations, the CDC, they're all corrupt. They all support the poisoning of the next generation of Americans.
Yep, they're on the back pockets of Big Pharma because every patient cured is a customer lost. So
Right.
I think you're making a really good point here, which also makes me want to double back to something you said earlier when we were looking at, these instances like what brought us here with the children
Right.
at the drag queen shows, the trans kids. And then you were saying we actually have this much bigger overarching problem of literal human trafficking, right? And so we're talking about multiple issues here, and you're right. I think I'm right too. But that doesn't mean we can't handle multiple things at once. And I still have to feed my kids the same. I have 4 kids. I still have to feed them the same stuff as these other people. None of my kids will ever be trans because I will teach them that's disgusting and wrong and a severe mental illness. You were created exactly how you were supposed to be, and anything outside of that is an abomination to creation and the biology, to science itself. Let's not, if we want to talk about a really broad point, let's look at what we're doing with the trans industry. That's not $1 billion industry, with these therapists that you're hiring, with these doctors that you say that we should consult, with the parents that are all making bank off of ruining these families' lives.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the American Medical Association and who currently owns them and who's currently convinced them to sell this idea that because your child's endocrine system's been disrupted by the poisons they've been allowed to sell, are currently making bank on the idea that surgery and more petrochemicals are currently being fed them in order to make sure these things continue to exist. Now, I don't know where you went, but we need to hold the American Medical Association accountable. We need to be paying attention as parents to make sure that we are as informed or better informed, because let's face it, the American Medical Association, okay, give me a moment. We got low flying jets here. Okay, the American Medical Association, it is the most corrupt lobby in the United States. It's also one of the oldest and most powerful. Okay, the American Medical Association is,
you better be careful with that statement, bro, because the Israel derangement syndrome is going to come out of the woodwork for your head on that one.
Yeah, well, they can. But the thing is, the American Medical Association started back in 1900. Rockefeller funded it in order to create his own pet drug peddling eugenics club to lobby the United States government in order to ensure that his eugenics drugs and eugenics programs were the ones that were being distributed to the United States, while they systematically eliminated the original best medicines that were available to us at the time. The herb lord, the herb wives, the people who made food from our herbs. That chemistry that made sure that we received the right kind of terpenes, the right kind of, yeah, AMA is a joke. The right kind of terpenes, whether it's through cannabis or whether it was through St. John's worts or any of these other things that the FDA has said these things have not been evaluated, you know, and you can't actually claim that they do the things that, you know, the 5,000 years of herbal lore says they can do, because the FDA wants to sell petrochemicals. They want to sell, and we get back to now here we have a society that's saying you have to live off the endocrine disruptors that we feed you. You have to live off the endocrine disruptors that we fail to remove from your environment. You have to live on these poisons, let them screw up your brain, let you decide that you are something other than what you are, so that once you're adequately psychotic, we can go through this next step of being able to determine whether or not our next level of petrochemical assignments is appropriate for you. And yes, they're absolutely making bank. We do not have the right sort of information because right now we got a Chinese billionaire that's currently funding the AMA to push Rockefeller-style science in order to continue this process. And let's face it, the primary reason China's doing it is because they want to disrupt what there is of American culture. Yeah, 200 years is not enough to develop a culture, especially considering the way we've consistently deculturalized the United States, you know, on a philosophy and an ideology that's less than 3 centuries old.
Yeah,
you know, we do not have that. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Now, we do not have that level of history, generational cohesiveness, you know, that we're looking at with the Persians, you know, or with Islam or with China. You know, these are 6,000, 10,000-year-old civilizations and cultures, you know, that have consistently developed and worked forward. Here we are 200 years in one of the most multicultural nations in the world. We are,
Yep.
You know, indigenous Americans, the diasporas from China, Nepal, the Middle East, Africa, you know, whether it was voluntary or forced, these are all diasporas. These are all cultures that still ended up here as part of the American makeup. You know, you're multi-heritage, I'm multi-heritage. You know, most Americans are multi-heritage. We have that coming from several different directions simply because we've been here 300 years. But we do not have a cohesive unit culture or a homogenized culture because we're still in the process of integrating all of these extremely diverse multicultural aspects, which, by the way, several libertarians have been very vocal against the idea of happening.
And that's exactly when I was trying to interject earlier, and I said no, go ahead. That's just the point that I was getting towards, is exactly correct. With, you know, within less than 300 years, you can't develop a culture with the first truly multicultural what's the word, mega country at this point that we're looking Goliath of a nation, right? And so, but I think one of the best points that you made, to circle all the way back to this Rockefeller style treatment of medicine, where we're doing petrochemicals and all these other chemicals, and one of those is HRT for children, right? And the main one that we use is Lupron, which we also use to castrate children. So why would we ever, knowing what you know and saying what you just said, ever co-sign giving these chemicals to misinformed, uneducated, very malleable and naive children?
Because I'm not advising giving it to them. I'm expecting parents to do due diligence and be the proper stewards for their children that they should be. That they've done their research, that they understand their child, that they understand what is going on and what is the next best available therapy. Now, this is one of the things we can go back on this. Okay, take a look at what the AMA does to women right now. How many times has your wife gone in to see a physician and the first question out of his mouth is, are you on your period or are you pregnant?
Yep. It's
Neither
going
of
to be
which
the
have
first one.
shit to do with a broken bone.
Yep. It's all the force feed medication.
Right. You turn around and they actually have an ongoing problem. Their first allegation is, you're probably imagining it. No, I've been living with endometriosis for 6 years. I've been diagnosed by 3 different physicians, but because Medicare won't allow me to keep one of them, I got to keep coming back to a new guy who keeps thinking that they know better about my body than the person who's been living in it for the past 40 fucking years. Yeah. Sorry.
Happen.
I know this is YouTube. We should be far enough into it so that, they don't catch it. But, this is one of those things. We have physicians that deliberately mitigate the wisdom of the women. And this is Rockefeller training. This is something that was indoctrinated into the medical schools 100 years ago. Disregard women. If they're insistent, send them to get a lobotomy. Oh, we can't do lobotomies anymore? Here's a chemical lobotomy. Take your Xanax, girl. You'll be better in the morning. Meanwhile, nothing actually gets solved.
Well, I don't think their intention is to solve problems.
Well, no.
We're talking about the government here. So, and that brings me to a really good point, because we completely agree on this. My hard red line with Chase is, even if you in the slightest sense want to approve any sort of medical interventionism into children with gender dysphoria, you're off. You're out. That's it. It's over with. You're done. Okay. It's a hard red line. That's child abuse. Absolutely not. I think you're a terrible human being. Everything that you're talking about is absolutely spot on, which is my second biggest problem with Chase and my number one problem with Donald Trump. And that's both of these guys carried water for Big Pharma and did everything. Well, one guy instituted it top down. The father of the poison poke, safe and effective, is now sudden and unexpected. Go to Who Touches Thermostat. He gave me this shirt, sponsor of the show. He created that poison poke, warp speed it, and now look at the detriment. This is going to get way more trouble than you're dropping the F-bomb. I just don't like. I personally don't cuss. I'm a devout Christian. I try not to. I cuss when I get mad or I get hurt. But
right.
So I need to be careful here. But that's Trump's full on, and still doesn't. He's just now coming around to saying we probably shouldn't have fast tracked this thing. Maybe he's just not even remotely living in the realm of reality, in my opinion, when it comes to the damage that he'd done to this country in 2020. And Chase carried water for that same damage. If you're too stupid that you would fall for the COVID propaganda that the government was peddling you, and this guy's wearing the freaking LGBTQIA mafia cult mask, standing in front of a Pfizer sign, no, I'm sorry. You're not even fit to be the local dog catcher.
Okay, so step back, take a look at that. Okay, Trump mandated it top down.
He didn't mandate it. He mandated the warp speed part.
He fast-tracked and he facilitated mandates. Okay, a lot of us were able to skip out because they didn't have the supply to actually poke everybody while it was still in the mandate phase. By the time we got around to there was enough supply in circulation, most people were saying, yeah, nah, already had it, don't need the stick.
Right.
And you turn around and come back. So the libertarian position is give people freedom to choose. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. We were dealing with Sarwak, who was mandatory mask. We were dealing with certain other individuals who were pro stick. Mask. I wore the mask around people who wanted me to wear the mask because that was part of my agreement with them as far as personal boundaries. When people wanted to see my face, I took the mask off. If they didn't want to wear the mask, I didn't care.
I'm not going to poo-poo that.
Right. This is about individual boundaries, about individual processes, about individual understanding of the community in which we live in. Okay. We do not mandate. Okay. We may have personal recommendations, personal suggestions, but we also understand that these are coming from laymen. I don't know what went into it. I got a cousin. He does he's actually in the same career field as Fossey was. You know, the whole germ spreading thing. Okay. Him and his family, including my extremely conservative Trump loving uncle and his wife, all got the jab based on, you know, my cousin's suggestion, request, you know, because he believed in the science. You know, at this point, he's probably second guessing it, but he's still alive. His kids are still alive. His parents are still alive. So it was, you know, ultimately end of the day, you know, a wash. You know, they don't know whether or not it helped. They don't know whether it didn't. Just like I didn't get the jab. I don't know whether it helped. I don't know whether it did.
You look pretty alive to me, Joe.
I haven't died yet. Working on it. You know, one day I'm one day closer every day. You know, how do we allow people to make mistakes in personal judgment? You know, and that's ultimately what this is. Okay, he made a mistake in personal judgment. His philosophy was still very much allow people to decide for themselves. And here we are 5 years later, well, 2000, you know, closing in on, 5 years later, you know, a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of lessons learned. You know, Chase wasn't one of the hard lefts going, hey, anybody that didn't get the stick needs to get stuck in a camp somewhere. He wasn't one of those.
No.
You know, whereas you got the other side of the coin, you had an awful lot of people that felt that anybody who did get the jab needed to be in a camp, needed to be separated from the rest of society.
I never saw a single post like that. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying I never saw it. I did see a bunch of me and you should still be locked up and they should have took my kids away. See a lot of that because we didn't just kowtow to what the government mandate was, you know, or the government suggested, you know, mandates on any of this. Personally, and you can ask my wife this. I left the house every day the first day that Deborah freaking Birx and Anthony Fauci, two genocidal maniacs that I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. The first day they came out with 15 days of soda spread, I left my house every day on purpose and drove 25 minutes to a gas station and went and bought a soda just because they told me not to. I never masked. I would fight with the people in the room. And this is all businesses, right? Not like a personal relationship scenario. And tell them, okay, I'm never coming back here again. You guys are anti-science. You do not believe in human rights. And if you were even slightly promoting masking up and social distancing and taking big pharma products for that, then you have no business even being the local dog catcher. That's my position. That's a hard red line for me. Now, in all fairness, I always disclose this because I don't like to argue on it because I hate the appeal to authority argument. But I also want to say I understand when people get fear-mongered into a thing, but when it comes to medicine, I do always disclose I am a highly trained medical professional from the United States military, the hospital corpsman, a field combat medicine, and an aerospace medicine technician. When I was an aerospace medicine tech, that was specifically dealing with pilots and high altitude and G-force and how it affects the upper respiratory system and what is COVID, an upper respiratory virus. Yeah. So there were things that I could see that the second they started dropping these videos, I was like, you're lying about something. And I understand that not everybody's going to have that in their back pocket. I get that. But some of this stuff is basic common sense and just do whatever the government says, even if it's your choice, anti-mandate. No, you're off the table. That's completely ignorant and stupid. That's political malfeasance and human malfeasance.
But that's one of the things, and this goes back to the issue with regards to Chase's policy on everything, and the fact that he has maintained the Libertarian Party platform in whole in all of this, and that is, it is the parent's choice as the child's steward to look out for the best of their welfare within the knowledge and experience that they are able to bring to the table.
And that's the problem I have with the whole situation, is because none of us had informed consent, and this guy carried water for them anyway. Did you have informed consent? I didn't have informed consent. How can you possibly make the best decision for you and your family if you don't have all the information that is deliberately being withheld from you specifically to put you in danger?
Okay. How do you make decisions without all the information that's available?
Okay. In 2024, I just default to Occam's razor at this point.
Right. Well, that's what we do. We default to one of the razors, one of the processes. We think through and we default because we have to make a decision. Whether we have all the information or not, we have to make a decision. Okay, the fact that the information was intentionally denied us, the fact that we were defrauded, the fact that we were lied to, that we were told things that weren't true, and that this was perpetuated. And let's get back to the idea of propaganda here. Okay. The average person, not those of us on the autism spectrum like you and I who exist, in this natural state of, do not trust the government, no matter what comes off of the propaganda. The average propaganda, 7 exposures to a lie, and the lie is cemented. It's concrete, and it literally takes 100 points of facts to counter those 7 initial contacts. Unless you're one of those weirdos like you and I.
Yeah, the people that nerd out on this.
Right. Okay, so how hard-pressed was the entire population? And this is under Trump, mind you. This is the Trump that RFK thinks he can use to make America healthy again.
Maybe Trump learned his lessons. You're saying Chase did.
Well, maybe both of them did. But the thing is which one of them have we not had the experience with at this point? Which one of them has, as a baseline philosophy, does not use the authoritarian approach to making people choose? Which one used the heaviness of the state? Which one used the heaviness of the state propaganda machine?
Well, we don't know how Chase would react because, we saw how he reacted. He did everything the government told him to do, but he's never been in office. So we don't know if he would have crippled to Birx and Fauci as well. We don't know.
We don't, but we do know Trump did.
We know Trump did, but we also know only one of them has a shot at sniffing the White House.
Well, yeah. And
I'm not advocating for Trump. I've never voted for Trump. So when all your, I was going to say when all your little buddies, let me not say that. Okay. When all the little flunkies run in the comment section saying that I say this, that, and this, and I'm just if it doesn't coalesce with MAGA talking points, I dismiss you completely. You're not just a moron. You're stupidly evil, and you're arrogant about it, which might actually be the real pandemic in this country is people that are stupid and arrogant. But I digress. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, now you're getting into the whole idea of Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah, that's a problem.
You take a look at that first 7 points of propaganda. Okay, people think they are informed. They now think they know something. Okay, you're 15 years as a medical professional in the United States military. They don't care because their 15 minutes of propaganda has given them more information than you've learned in your entire life. That's the way they approach it. Every time, because we've told them and convinced them that those first 7 points of contact with the lie outweigh all the professional experience accumulated, over centuries, over aeons. You know, we take a look at what Rockefeller did with the AMA and how quickly he turned upside down millennia of medical knowledge. Also, his little, you know, eugenics drug club could profiteer. And we're still in that situation. We still have a eugenics drug pushing club that is the strongest lobby in the United States of America, pushing petrochemicals for diseases that can be solved with better nutrition. While they continue to steal the nutrition out of the food they feed us for corporate profits.
I
And
love
now
that you brought. Go ahead. Sorry.
we want to talk about how do we deal with those 1 in 1,000 events where a parent's dealing with a child who's had their endocrine system completely disrupted. And there aren't really any good medical solutions. And they're
philosophical ones that work quite well, though, Joe. And that you squash that right out the gate. You do not let them under any. You do not. I wouldn't encourage somebody that has an eating disorder to continue their eating disorder. Or even promoting it. Right now, we're promoting this.
That's where we're going to run into issues on parenting concepts, and that's fine. You want to raise your kids your way, I want to raise my kids my way. You know,
Absolutely.
Other parents want to be able to raise their kids their way. Now you want to see those parents raise their kids your way, but the thing is your way doesn't necessarily constitute with the combination of trauma and upbringing that those other parents have received.
That doesn't mean you, under no circumstances does that mean you support a severe mental illness. It is not about forcing or trying to even convince people to raise their kids the same way I raise them. That's not, I don't raise each kid the same way. Each kid requires a different set of educational delivery, of parenting habits. I don't raise all of my kids the same. Each kid gets raised differently according to what I believe that their personality traits require for them to succeed in life. Look, there is no argument that pushing a severe mental illness and promoting a severe mental illness that results in a 40% self-deletion rate ever going to be on the table as good parenting. Not for any child. That's demonic.
No. Let's go there. Let's take a look at the self-deletion rate and what's going on with our food, with our products. How do we correct the situation with the endocrine disruptors? Okay, you say
you're only going to go two routes.
Well,
you're either going to have to use the legislative arm and force these companies to stop under threat of law to stop poisoning your food, or you have to completely deregulate the entire industry and start from ground zero.
Right.
The latter part's not going to happen.
Well, no, the latter part's not going to happen, but that's the thing that ultimately has to happen. Okay, you deregulate the entire industry. You eliminate all of the protections Wall Street has with regards to the monopolies on food. Those 6 companies that control all the food in the United States, those 5 companies that control all of the petrochemicals and pharmaceuticals, you know, in the world. You take those, you deregulate them, you tell them, you know, you got no protections. None whatsoever. You screw up, you get sued. You get sued, you pay the fine. And we're not setting a limit. We're not allowing the cost of business to not interrupt, you know, to not deplete profits completely 100%. Okay, we need to do that. In addition to that, we need to allow the cottage industries to start coming back. We need those physicians, those medical professionals that understand plant chemistry, you know, the things that actually work with our bodies. Endocannabinoid systems with cannabis, you know, working with other plant-based medicines, psilocybin, you know, things that actually work on helping us recover, one, our physical health, because we're ingesting natural carbon forms rather than petrochemical carbons. You know, the things that were designed to work with our body, to heal our body, to heal our mind, because all of these are natural things. We need to make sure that all of these industries, all of these organizations that have currently criminalized our best self-care are completely deregulated and remain unprotected in the United States. And they need to actually buck up and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what they are releasing to the public is indeed safe and sane, which they have yet to do in any way, shape, or form. You know, they've literally gone to Congress and said, hey, you know, give us exemption from suits, you know, before we release this to the public. You know, Congress's complicity in that shit right there should literally have every one of them strung up for treason against the people. Because they literally said
after a court of law. After a court of law. This is per YouTube standards.
Oh, yeah, for YouTube standards. But ultimately, this is what they did. They took it upon themselves to exempt a corporation from the poisoning and murder of citizens of the United States in order to push an untested science on the population at large that was intentionally misinformed. And every one of these congressmen knew the population was intentionally misinformed. There is no innocence for any single one of those yes votes.
Nope, they're monsters.
Yeah, but we still have 50% of the population, or wherever we are with that look at those first 7 points of information on this issue and go, no, they did the right thing. And that's where we get into the misinformation, the disinformation. Okay? I got it. You have issues with Chase because he didn't decipher what was wrong with the mandate early enough. He chose to accept that what he was getting was indeed the truth, and he accepted it at face value. Okay?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. That's in a short story, yes.
And I get that. Okay? You say, I don't trust him because he didn't have the critical thinking skills necessary to discern the truth from the falsehood.
Well said.
Okay. Now, you say that, I can agree with you. I understand. My objection is because Chase didn't have the critical thinking skills to discern truth from fiction. What I have objection to is he carried water and supported mandates.
I never said supported mandates.
Okay. He carried water.
Objectively true.
Well, he did. There were an awful lot of people that are coming back around that carried water. You know,
correct.
Trump.
Only one of them is running for president under the Libertarian Party, to which I subscribe and am a member of both the national and state level.
Okay. No, that's fair. However, he has learned his lesson. He understands where that situation is, and he continues to support the policy he supported even when he was carrying water. And that is that there be no mandates. Okay. The objection is that he wasn't able to discern the falsehood from the truth. And he exercised a personal set of values for himself. In no point did he take the time to say that those values should be applied under threat of government force or violence.
I understand.
You know,
my objection is on its face fundamentally intellectual.
Yes. Now, that I got no problem with. You're objecting because you saw him in an instance where you saw the truth and he didn't. You discerned the truth He didn't. Okay, if we applied that to all of yeah. Anyway, you know, we got politicians that knew the truth and endorsed the lie. Trump knew the truth and endorsed the lie, mandated the lie.
He didn't mandate anything, though. That was Biden. Biden's the one that used OSHA to try to shove down vax mandates on 100 million Americans. What Trump did that I object to is carried water for Big Pharma, did everything that he was told to do by Birx and Fauci, and advocated for the lockdowns of the governors that were locking their states down, and verbally assaulted the ones that opened their states up, Ron DeSantis, too soon, or countries like Sweden, who never locked down and saw the same results. Now, did he mandate
at the same time?
No, but he advocated for it.
At the same time, under Trump, there were governors, there were municipalities, there were insurance companies that mandated the companies they insured mandated the vax.
Freaking web of snakes right there. But ultimately, if we keep it on the surface level, Trump left it up to the states.
He left it up to the insurance companies. He left it up to the New York Stock Exchange. Mind you, the New York Stock Exchange is 90% owned by the New York Stock Exchange. 90% of corporate America is owned by 90% of corporate America. None of these companies are actually owned by individuals. None of them are ever going to be responsible to an individual because they're only responsible to each other. And in that capacity, each and every one of their CEOs is responsible to the value of the company to the shareholders. You will never see corporate America advocate in the interest of the people of America, ever. Because there's only one thing corporate America cares about, and that's their profit margins on every individual business. You know, we can step back, we can take a look. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Those three companies own 30% of every company on the New York Stock Exchange.
If not more.
Well, they can't own more because then they violate trust laws, yada, yada, which is why it's three companies, they're all with the same board members, all with the same shareholders.
Right.
You know, that own 30% of everything.
Which is 90% because they're all the same people. So 30% for Vanguard, 30% for State Street, 30% for
right.
Forgetting the other one off the top of my head, but so now you're looking closer to 90%. Okay.
Because
they're all the same people.
Yeah.
BlackRock, the biggest
BlackRock. And they're all very involved with the AMA because the AMA makes money pushing drugs. This is this symbiotic relationship we got with the poison that poisons America. The foods we eat, all owned by BlackRock. The medicine we take to treat the symptoms for the foods we eat, owned by BlackRock. You know, the extenuating circumstances, you know, the second and third tier, because we got to take, you know, this pill to counter this side effect, and then a side effect pill for the side effect of that pill. And it just keeps escalating and escalating. You know, we have people in the medical system right now on Medicaid taking 30 different medications, each one of them subsidized by Medicaid D. Okay. All those profits from Medicaid D, because somebody's taken 30 drugs in order to alleviate the symptoms that the previous drug, you know, initiated, is subsidizing BlackRock, subsidizing the pharmaceutical companies, subsidizing the AMA, because they're all invested in each other. And now we're back to the fact that we're poisoning everybody's endocrine system, and we're allowing the poisoning of our mind as a culture, as a society. You know, poor little America, all at 275 years old, you know, still doesn't have a culture of its own. You know, doesn't know how to react or adapt to a, you know, a millennial level event. You know, we don't have that history, that networking, and we've gone through the process of being deculturalized. We're no longer families. We're no longer small units. 1950s when they decided, through social construct that the nuclear family was the end all be all, and you can take mom, dad, and 2.5 kids and ship them anywhere in the United States without any mutual support, without a community, without family to support them, and they're going to be completely A-okay. Strip them of their culture, strip them of their history, strip them of their associations. Just plug them in somewhere. Yep, they'll be fine because, that's the plug and play unit that is the standard of the United States of America. Now, the nuclear family,
the greatest form of governance known to man.
Yeah.
Yep. Look, I had the answer to your question, Joe. I mean,
it's extended family, it's extended network. The entire thing was social engineering. FDR and his post-World War II BS wanted to do what, Israelis were doing with their little communes, where they stuck all the kids in one place and all the parents in another, and never the two should meet. You're back into the situation where you're talking about the social engineering that we've allowed to occur through issues like, again, back to Rockefeller and his AMA, and the APA and the Bar Association and all of these different progressive intellectual organizations that never died the way they should have died. Okay. The foundations of most of these are rooted in eugenics and social engineering and the concept of creating an industrial workforce that robbed the people of their souls.
You brought up two things right there that I want to touch on before we get up out. I wanted to go a lot, but it's just I don't want to hold you. It's been a phenomenal conversation, and we got to get the kids and everybody ready for church tonight. But you brought up multiple times now eugenics, which is just wildly undervalued. That point you make right there, I think, is missed on so many people, especially when you have these goofy freaking QAnon morons running around just ruining the argument that where depopulation is actually a real thing. And here's something that I have, and I don't want to get too far off into it because again, we got to go. But you're absolutely right. It's eugenics. And I'd say the number one form of eugenics is the advocation and promotion of infanticide, aka abortion, which your candidate promotes. Maybe he doesn't promote it, but he 100% accepts it. And that is eugenics. And look no further than I'm going to make the point that everybody always makes. You probably already know this, but some people might not, right? The founder of Planned Parenthood, the number one of eugenics facility on the planet, was overtly anti-black and overtly wanted abortion to be used to eliminate the black race. So how are we justifying as libertarians, and libertarianism and abortion are fundamentally opposed to each other because we are opposed to political violence for gain. We're opposed to violence against somebody who's not threatening your life. And we promote the sanctity of life, prosperity, and private property. Libertarianism and abortion are fundamentally opposed to one another. That is an innocent human life that you're executing at an over 99% rate for your self-convenience. That is a violation of the NAP in the highest regards.
Okay, now that's a debate that basically requires an entire new. We aren't going to be able to cover.
Show. Right.
Okay. But this goes back into the eugenics issue. There is no organization in the United States that was initiated in the progressive era that does not have its roots in eugenics. Any government program that's involved in reproductive decisions of the American family is de facto eugenics.
Love that.
Okay. Government funded abortion, eugenics. I gotcha. Clinics for forced sterilization, eugenics. Okay. The child tax credit is eugenics because it's government incentivization to have children. Forced birth programs like the ban on abortions in the state of Idaho is eugenics because it's a government initiated force.
But that would be a pro-human eugenics, not the same eugenics we're talking about in wiping out.
No,
population.
but it's not. Reason why is because the anti-abortion bans in the state of Idaho are by themselves destructive. Because what you're doing is by forcing the birth to continue, death before abortion, what you're determining is that a life lived is of less value. That is the mother's life is of less value than a fetus that is currently killing her.
That's not a real thing.
This is, and what this does.
You know that's wrong, right?
Well, you and I can discuss that on a different scene. But what this is this is a removal of a genetic trait, genetic line that does not birth well. This is the culling of the herd.
Syndrome?
This is a government instituted culling of the herd, because what you're doing is you are eliminating women from the gene pool that cannot birth children consistently.
You're eliminating women from the gene pool by aborting them because of your convenience and lack of self-discipline in your sex life. There's over 60 million babies have been killed since Roe v. Wade. That's far more than any woman that had died giving birth due to a government abortion ban. This is not even a conversation. That is wildly lopsided. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to kill the baby anymore. It's 2024. My ex-wife gave birth to a 25-week-old. She runs around. She's perfectly healthy. You don't have to abort the baby. And a lot of these circumstances are them killing the baby anyway. And the mother's life was over 99% of abortions have nothing to do with the life of the mother. It's complete. When we talk about mis and disinformation, that's exactly what that is, because that's not happening.
Yeah.
Again, you can take all the steps you need to take to save the mother's life. And if the baby dies in the process, well, then that's just a consequence of saving the already lived life as opposed to the unborn child.
Right.
You don't need to kill that child.
Okay. Well, here's the situation. Death before abortion in the state of Idaho is effectively the policy. She will bleed out on the table on a child that is going to die that is in the process of killing her.
That's not true. That is happening nowhere. It is not true. Even after the Supreme Court shot the Roe v. Wade was always terrible law anyway, but I don't want to get into all that. I'm talking about constitutionality.
Roe v. Wade was
garbage. Yeah, it was absolutely terrible, based on nothing. But since it being sent back to the states per SCOTUS, that doesn't happen. That is not happening anywhere unless pure neglect on the mother. Or, most there's a large, if we want to have, again, we don't want to get into the abortion debate. It's just something I wanted to touch on real quick because you brought up eugenics. But if we're really talking about that, then again, over 99% of abortions are used for the convenience of the mother. It has nothing to do with health whatsoever. That is objectively a violation of fundamental libertarianism.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
But that's a different discussion.
Well, we'll do it. We'll do another one. We'll do another one. Me and you, just abortion. It won't be long. Maybe sometime this week or maybe Thursday or something, because I got Jeff coming on Tuesday.
We just spent an hour and 10 minutes on a subject that should have taken 10 minutes. Come on. You really think we can keep abortion under 30?
Anyway. I don't have to be under 30, but I was gonna tell you one point that you brought up that I haven't heard anybody else say, that I've been preaching for a long time. I've never heard anybody else say, and you alluded to it, and I think you'll agree here that one of the biggest drawbacks to the Industrial Revolution is the intentional destruction of the nuclear family, so they can promote their corporate interests by putting both the man and the woman in the workforce. And then when we get down to the nuts and bolts of it, The real problem, and nobody wants it. Well, not nobody, but many people don't want to hear this. And it's fundamentally and factually true. And James Madison said it. He said the Constitution is only fit for a moral and religious people. It is wholly unfit for any other form of government. The reason that we're seeing the destruction of every fabric of institution in inch, in centimeter, in millimeter of this country is because we rejected God. Period. That's it.
Okay. With the understanding that corporate America, the marriage of government and industry here in the United States, corporatism, neither the government nor the corporations are moral or ethical.
No.
As a result, neither should be responsible for the decisions of a family or a man or a woman, simply because they are inherently amoral.
That is correct. The nuance of the decision making for the family part, we've touched on, so I'm not going to dive into that. But yes, the government and its institutions are wholly amoral. Before we get out of here, Joe, there's two things I want you to do. I'm going to give you the floor. So when you said I disappeared earlier, it's because I gave you the solo shot. So I'm about to do that again. I want you to talk about your shirt and then tell everybody where and how to follow you. If you can't read it, y'all, I'm sure you can, but it says defend the guard, which is absolutely a libertarian thing that we're trying to get in Trump's face. I think we've got it in his face just in case he wins. Because again, I think this whole argument over Chase Oliver it's wholly just dumb. The guy is not even going to get 1% of the vote. So whatever. Nobody knows who the guy is. He's irrelevant. There are two people in this race that can win the presidency, and one of which has the ear of the National Party, who is currently pushing for the pardoning of Ross Ulbricht and what your shirt says. Now, regardless of that, I want you to promote the Defend of the Guard, because if you're wearing that shirt, you know more about it than me.
Okay, Defend the Guard here in the United States, currently being run by an organization, or one of the piloters for the organization, Dan McKnight. Dan McKnight has been running U.S. troops or troops home, and the entire idea is no more wars, no more violations of the U.S. Constitution on the declaration of war, or the use of troops abroad to support U.S. military adventurism. Bring our troops home. In addition to that, part of the process is make sure each and every one of the states passes Defend the Guard legislation, which prevents the United States president from using the National Guard to support his military adventurism in countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Cambodia, Laos, all those places where the National Guard have been used in times of war or just in times to support military action. So reach out to any organization, Defend the Guard, Google it. You're going to be able to find a chapter or an organization in your area, in your state, find ways to support getting the legislation. Dan McKnight, Ben Adams are the projectors here in the state of Idaho. Chase Oliver has talked about it and defended it in committee hearings in Georgia. New Hampshire's been busy with it. Arizona, strong. Texas as well. A lot of these states have chapters that support it. Get involved, donate, make sure it happens. Matter of fact, if you get the opportunity, dig up Dan McKnight's speech at Rage Against the War Machine 2 that happened this last weekend. Absolutely great speech. Great commercial that they used to bring it up and promote it. The event itself was a little bit underwhelming. However, look it up. It's amazing, and it's one of the most important things for the recovery of the United States, and that is stop investing in foreign wars.
Absolutely based. Amen. Thank you, brother. And for those of you wondering, also, I did want to get into the border policy, but we're going to shelf that for another day. But I will say this about border policy. If we actually got Trump, because let's be honest, the Democrats are not going to do this. If we could actually get Trump to Defend the Guard, it would be wildly better than anything he's currently proposing to help with the border. Um, Joe, you're absolutely amazing, brother. Thank you for taking on this task on such short notice. You're well informed, you're well educated, well spoken, and as I've bragged on you to multiple people, we can have our disagreements, y'all. This is a good man. I'm a good man, and I think you can see that through this conversation. So I'm urging you, if you want more uh, conversations, healthy conversations, because I think fundamentally conversations like these are vastly more important than what we're seeing in the political landscape today. This is how we can grow our country together and our movement together at a grassroots level, because fundamentally, again, you're not going to get much help from the federal government, no matter who's in there. So I would say focus local. That would be your best avenue and your best chance for victory. I'm going to give you the solo shot again, Joe. Tell everybody if you got anything you're working on right now, because I know at one point I had you on the show before you were running for Congress, I believe, in Idaho. Is there anything you're working for, and how can we support you?
Right now, one of the big things that I'm working on is Kind Idaho. We are currently working on a personal use and home cultivation decriminalization. Decriminalize cannabis now. It's going to be one of our initiatives that we start for the 2026 election. And the idea is stop arresting people for personal use. If they're growing in their own home for personal use, producing their own edibles, if they got a small amount that they're carrying back from an out-of-state dispensary, these people do not need to be arrested for self-care. You should not need the state's permission for self-care. Why are we asking the state for permission to use the medicine that works for us, for the things that make us feel better, that makes us better people as we identify ourselves? So kindidaho.org, that's our website. The initiative, Decriminalize Cannabis Now, is currently with the Secretary of State of the state of Idaho for legal review. They're going to come back with their notes, make suggestions. We're going to tweak it a little, send it back for the titles. We'll be collecting signatures starting on November 1st. So if you want to see personal use, whether you're using it recreationally, whether you're using it medicinally, kindidaho.org, right there. Absolutely. Stop by, give us a hand, help us out. We're also selling some great t-shirts. You can see the pictures of the t-shirts on our newsletters that are coming out.
Nice. That is incredible, Joe. You are the man, brother. How can people follow you personally?
Twitter, Idaho Joe, ID Joe, as in Idaho Joe, ID short for Idaho, ID Joe for Idaho at Twitter.
That's incredible, brother. Thank you so much for being here. I try to get you back on ASAP, because this is the kind of conversations that we need, my friend. Again, I can't thank you enough. You're awesome.
You're welcome, Noel. Glad we could have a civil conversation on this. Looking forward to civil conversations on other hot button topics.
Absolutely, 100%, brother. You are awesome. I will see you very soon. Thank you so much.
See you soon. Bye.
Absolutely incredible. Wonderful. My son bopped in here, left the door open, so now there's sunlight blasting me in the face right here. Anyway, kindidaho.org. Check that out. Follow Joseph, because he's a good guy. You know what I mean? This is what we need. This is what we need. I'll be back with another debate. I'll put the promo out. It's going to be on Tuesday. Big debate. I want more of these on my channel. I want to talk to people that I disagree with and see how we can move the needle forward. Or if we need to just not have certain relationships in our life. Joe ain't one of them. He's great. Idaho Joe, ID Joe for Idaho at Twitter. Kindidaho.org is what he's working on right now. And thank you, bro. And thank all of you. I will see you Tuesday night, 7 or no, I'm sorry, because of the guest schedule that I'm debating. It's probably going to be at 5, but stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. Love y'all. See you Tuesday. And I